Sometimes humans play God by introducing different species into foreign habitats to fix a problem. But 9 out of 10 times, the plan backfires. If history has taught us anything, it's that nature cannot be hacked. And as the famous quote from Jurassic Park says, "Nature always finds a way." This is exactly what happened when a foreign mongoose population was introduced into the Japanese wild to combat the Habu snake problem. Did this plan work out, and what were the consequences of such an unnatural introduction? Join us as we see how 30 snake hunters were brought to Japan, but 25 years later, everyone was shocked by what happened. The Mongoose-Snake rivalry. Before finding out why Japan decided to pit these two animals against each other, let's first get some background information on them. Starting with the mongoose, also called the small Indian mongoose, is native to the Middle East, southern China, and South Asia. Male mongooses grow up to about 2 feet in length, while females are slightly smaller at just under 20 inches. Compared to the Japanese weasel, the small Indian mongoose is a little bigger. Their diet includes a wide range of creatures, from tiny bugs like grasshoppers and crickets to larger animals such as frogs, rats, snakes, and rabbits. Now let's talk about the Japanese Habu snake. It is highly venomous and mostly found in Japan's Ryukyu Islands, which include Okinawa and Amami Oshima. It lives in different places, from forests and grasslands to areas close to where people live. The Habu snake hunts small mammals, birds, lizards, and frogs by injecting venom into its prey to stop it from escaping before eating it. The Habu often stays still and waits for its prey to get close, then strikes incredibly fast. Another cool fact is that the Habu snake can swim, which helps it travel between islands to find food or a mate. It also has a pretty long life for a snake, living as long as 20 years in the wild. So who would win in a face-off between an Indian mongoose and a Habu snake? That's an interesting question. Mongooses are known to be fierce hunters, but they don't usually attack unless they have a good reason. Most of the time they go after snakes because snakes are a big part of their diet. The Indian mongoose, in particular, is famous for being one of the best snake hunters out there. It's even been known to take on the king cobra, which is one of the deadliest snakes in the world. In the wild, mongooses hunt and massacre snakes and eat them completely, even the venom sacs. Sometimes, mongooses fight snakes to protect themselves or their babies. Some snake species hunt mongooses, so a mongoose won't hesitate to fight back to keep its pups safe. While mongooses can unalive many kinds of snakes, cobras are one of their top targets. Interestingly, mongooses have a natural resistance to snake venom, which helps them survive these battles. However, even with their immunity, fighting snakes isn't without risks. Mongooses can still get injured or even end up dead during these confrontations. Many snakes, especially cobras, are bigger and can put up a tough fight. Sometimes, the snake manages to unalive the mongoose before it can finish the fight. And even when the mongoose wins, it might still die later if it gets hurt while eating the snake. The snake's fangs might pierce the mongoose's stomach or another part of its digestive system, causing internal bleeding and leaking fluids. This can turn deadly in no time. At first, the fight might look like the snake has the upper hand. The mongoose often seems harmless, sniffing around cautiously, almost like a curious little lamb. But this is just part of the mongoose's strategy. On the other hand, the snake usually reacts aggressively. It might coil up, hiss loudly, and if it's a cobra, spread its hood as a warning to scare the mongoose away. Snakes tend to strike first, aiming to intimidate the mongoose or even land a bite. However, the mongoose is usually too quick for the snake. Even if the snake manages to land an initial bite, it doesn't often harm the mongoose due to its natural venom resistance. Most of the time, the mongoose avoids the attack altogether, dodging the snake's strikes with impressive speed. For a few moments, it's like a dance, strike after strike from the snake while the mongoose keeps dodging. Then suddenly, the mongoose makes its move. It lunges forward, biting down hard on the snake's head to stop it from fighting back. Sometimes, this attack can unalive the snake immediately. If not, the mongoose shakes it violently and slams it against the ground until the snake finally dies. You might still be curious, why are mongooses able to survive snake venom? According to the Animal Facts Encyclopedia, mongooses are not completely immune to all types of snake venom, but they are quite resistant to it. For example, if a mongoose gets bitten by a cobra, it often doesn't suffer any immediate harm from the venom. This is because mongooses have a unique brain chemical called acetylcholine. The acetylcholine receptors in their bodies latch onto the venom as it enters their bloodstream. This process neutralizes the venom and stops it from attaching to the mongoose's nervous system. Without access to the nerves, the venom becomes harmless and is eventually filtered out by the kidneys and liver. That said, mongooses are not invincible. Multiple snake bites can overwhelm their natural defenses. When this happens, some venom might manage to reach the nervous system, causing the mongoose to slow down. If the mongoose becomes sluggish, the snake can keep striking, which might ultimately lead to the mongoose's death. Still, the timeless battle between snakes and mongooses didn't go unnoticed by humans. It was this very rivalry that inspired the Japanese to introduce mongooses as a solution to their snake problem, which quite literally was biting them. But what happened next? Let's find out. The introduction of mongooses to Japan. Back in the late 1970s, Japan had a serious problem with venomous snake bites, especially in the countryside. To deal with this growing danger, Japanese officials decided to introduce a predator that could naturally control the snake population and protect lives. But over the next 25 years, something unexpected happened. The Habu snake, a venomous pit viper found in Japan's Ryukyu Islands, particularly in Okinawa and Taiwan, was causing the most trouble. Its venomous bites were a major issue in some areas. For example, in the year 1980, around 400 people were bitten, and sadly, some lost their lives. While Japan has several venomous snake species, the Habu and its close relatives, like the larger eastern pit vipers, were the most dangerous. These snakes belong to the same family as rattlesnakes and puff adders, with distant relatives that include coral snakes and cobras. This made the situation even more frightening, as many people in these areas lived with the constant fear of being bitten. Habu snake bites were especially dangerous because, for a long time, there wasn't any known cure. Even after different types of antivenom, like Protobothrops antivenom, Habu antivenom, Trimerosaurus antivenom, and polyvalent antivenom were created, they weren't easy to get. In many cases, the antidotes were stored in liquid form, which made things worse for rural areas without electricity or proper storage. Sadly, most snake bites happened in these remote regions, and building power lines there took too much time and money. It felt like making antidotes widely available was an impossible challenge, leaving many people in a terrible situation when bitten by a Habu snake. To deal with this growing problem, Japan came up with a creative solution. They decided to introduce an animal that preys on snakes and has natural immunity to venom. This led to the introduction of mongooses. However, like many well-intended plans, things didn't go exactly as expected. In the year 1979, around 30 small Indian mongooses were brought to Amami Oshima Island. The goal was to help control the Habu snake population and also to deal with the increasing number of rats in the area. Mongooses are originally from regions like India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and Pakistan, making them a species thought to adapt well to the task at hand. Bringing mongooses to Japan seemed like the perfect way to control the snake problem. Known for their speed and agility, mongooses are amazing hunters, especially when it comes to snakes like cobras, which are relatives of the Habu. Another advantage is their unique biology that helps them resist cobra venom, allowing them to survive bites that would be deadly to most other animals. On top of that, they have quick reflexes and sharp teeth, making them great at delivering fatal bites to snakes. On paper, mongooses seemed like the perfect solution to keep people safe from snake bites. But things didn't work out as expected. The first problem was that mongooses are active during the day, while Habu snakes are nocturnal. This meant the two rarely crossed paths. Even when they did, mongooses weren't as effective at hunting snakes as everyone hoped. Snakes are tricky to catch, and chasing them takes a lot of effort. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning of the problems caused by introducing mongooses. Let's see how this foreign species became a bigger issue in Japan than anyone had imagined. Things go horribly wrong. By the year 1993, concerns started growing about the mongoose population on Amami Oshima Island. The Ministry of the Environment noted how their numbers had increased dramatically. By the year 2000, their population had soared to nearly 10,000. Surprisingly, the decline in the Habu snake population was not due to the mongooses. Although it had been hoped they would control the snakes, the mongooses preferred easier prey, leaving the issue of snake bites unresolved for the locals. After all, why go after dangerous snakes when there were plenty of easy meals like mice and rabbits around? Unfortunately, the mongooses began preying on the island's native animals, including the Amami rabbit and other local species. Amami Ushima, a subtropical island and UNESCO World Heritage Site, is home to many rare and vulnerable creatures. The Amami rabbit, often called a living fossil because it's one of the last remnants of ancient Asian rabbits, became a primary target for the mongooses. These rabbits, once widespread on the mainland, now survive only on 2 small islands. The mongoose invasion severely endangered their survival. The mongooses didn't stop there. They also preyed on ryukyu rats, which are now endangered, and significantly harmed 15 native species, numbering thousands of individuals in total. The agricultural sector suffered as well. Mongooses attacked farm birds, ate fruits straight from the fields, and spread diseases to livestock, even when they weren't eating them. Over just 2 decades, the habitat for small animals shrank by 40%, showing just how devastating the mongooses' presence had been. Islands, with their unique ecosystems, are especially vulnerable to predators like mongooses. Local species often have no natural defenses against such threats. The damage became so severe that removing the mongooses was seen as absolutely necessary. It took nearly 25 years to evict them, and close to 50 years to finish the entire project. While it might seem harsh to eliminate so many animals, it was the right choice to protect the native species. If invasive animals like mongooses aren't controlled quickly, they can cause irreparable harm, turning what could have been a manageable issue into a near-impossible challenge. Here's where the case takes an interesting turn. People in Japan, especially in Okinawa, discovered that they didn't actually need mongooses to deal with the venomous Habu snakes. Instead, various repellents were being used effectively to keep the snakes away. One of the most popular products was called Habu Knock, which became a common choice in schools and homes. It worked by releasing a strong smell that snakes couldn't stand, driving them away before they could enter. Another widely used repellent, Hebeles, was a favorite among campers, who sprayed it around their tents and campsites to create a snake-free zone. These repellents were usually sprayed around an area's perimeter to form a barrier that snakes avoided. The secret was in the ingredients, which contained strong-smelling substances like sulfur or naphthalene. These chemicals irritated the sensory organs of the snakes, making the area unwelcoming. With solutions like these, the introduction of mongooses seemed unnecessary in hindsight. Interestingly, the traps that were originally designed to control the mongoose population also turned out to be useful for reducing Habu snake numbers. With a few adjustments to the bait and trap mechanisms, they were able to catch snakes effectively. Beyond chemical repellents and traps, some people turned to natural methods to deter the Habu snakes. Certain plants, like marigolds and lemongrass, were found to be helpful. These plants released strong scents that snakes didn't like, making them less likely to approach areas where they were planted. However, with the mongoose population spiraling out of control, the Japanese government couldn't just sit back and watch the invasive species wreak havoc. It was time to take decisive action and confront the growing mongoose problem directly. What followed was a bold and determined effort to turn things around. Let's see how they tackled it. Efforts to control the mongoose population. By the year 2000, the Japanese government had launched a program aimed at reducing the mongoose population. Since then, around 32,000 mongooses were captured, with the last one being caught in April 2018. No new cases were reported after that, which led experts to declare that the mongoose population on Amami Oshima Island had been completely wiped out. The Ministry of the Environment proudly announced this success, though it was clear the mongooses themselves wouldn't be celebrating. But how did Japan manage to get rid of the invasive mongooses? The journey was far from easy. At first, traps were set along the roads, but they proved mostly ineffective since they rarely attracted mongooses. It didn't take long for the authorities to realize they needed a new approach. They eventually designed special traps that were more effective, ensuring that other animals wouldn't be accidentally caught. They also used toxic bait and attractants, which are substances with strong scents that lured animals in. Different monitoring techniques were put into play, including search dogs, which turned out to be a game-changer in the fight against the mongoose population. Local civilians also played a huge part in the effort. Since 2005, teams made up of locals and volunteers spent countless hours trapping mongooses, making a significant impact on reducing the population. Interestingly, by the year 2020, Habu snake bites had become much less of a concern, with the number of bites dropping to around 60 each year. However, this improvement wasn't due to the mongooses. Instead, people started taking more preventative steps, and access to antidotes became easier, which helped reduce fatalities. One of the key measures was the use of physical barriers to keep snakes out of homes and yards. One effective method involved installing snake-proof fencing. This type of fence is typically made from fine mesh or solid materials that snakes can't get through. The fence should be buried a few inches into the ground to prevent snakes from digging under it, and it should be at least 3 feet high to stop them from climbing over. Another way to use physical barriers is by sealing all the cracks and gaps in homes. Since snakes can slip through tiny openings, it's important to check for any holes around doors, windows, and the foundation. These gaps can be sealed with cork or weather stripping to keep snakes from entering. Barriers have also been created around certain areas, like gardens or play zones. For instance, mesh or hardware cloth placed around the bottom of a garden bed can keep snakes out. It's important to ensure that the barrier is tight and secure, with no gaps. Additionally, keeping yards tidy and free of debris acts as a natural defense. Piles of rocks, wood, and other materials that snakes might hide in should be cleared away, and bushes should be trimmed while grass should be kept short to reduce hiding places. These actions make the property less appealing to snakes. Thanks to these practices, since 1992, there hasn't been a single reported death from a Habu snake bite. While mongooses weren't the solution, the community's efforts have had a real impact on reducing snake bites and ensuring public safety. However, the battle against invasive species is far from over. Mongooses still live on other islands, and the lessons learned from Amami Oshima are being applied elsewhere in Japan. For example, a team of specialists is preparing to go to northern Okinawa, where mongooses have been seen. There's concern that these mongooses could spread to Amami Oshima again, prompting Japan to restart its efforts. Mongooses were first brought to Okinawa about 50 years before they arrived on Amami Oshima. 17 mongooses were released there. The conditions in Okinawa, with its warmer climate and environment similar to the mongoose's natural habitat, have been perfect for them. As a result, they reproduce and survive at higher rates in Okinawa, making conservation efforts more difficult. Currently, the mongoose population in northern Okinawa is being managed, but in central and southern areas, mongooses continue to thrive. Fences have been built in Okinawa to limit their spread, and these seem to be working. Though the fences aren't very tall, they have an L-shaped base to prevent mongooses from burrowing under. Normally, mongooses don't climb over these barriers, but just like on Amami Oshima, the survival of 3 native bird species in Okinawa now depends on controlling the mongoose population. However, this isn't the first time Japan has faced problems with invasive mongooses. This has happened before. Let's find out when and how together. Others tried to weaponize the mongoose before Japan. If the idea of introducing mongooses to control pests sounds familiar, that's because it's not a new concept. Japan is not the first country to try biological control. In fact, there's an entire field of study dedicated to this technique called biological pest control, where one species is used to manage another. When researchers pursue biological control, they usually start by studying the pest and its natural predator. They then carry out further investigations to check if introducing the predator could harm other nearby species. Only after thorough research do they typically release the predator to do its job. Humans have been using biological control for a long time, and in many cases it has worked. A well-known example is farmers using predatory insects to protect their fruit trees and gardens. But like anything, it can have unintended effects. which is why it's important to handle the process carefully, as Japan's mongoose story shows. In a similar way, the small Asian mongoose has been introduced to various places, including Cuba, Croatia, Jamaica, Haiti, Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles, Honduras, Panama, and other countries. In many of these cases, the introductions have worked. However, not every attempt has been successful. For example, in the 1800s, Hawaii tried introducing mongooses. At that time, Hawaii's most valuable crop was sugarcane, and the plan was to use mongooses to help control the rats that were damaging the sugarcane fields. From the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s, Hawaiian sugar plantations had a major problem with rats that loved to eat the sweet sugar cane stalks. These rats caused a lot of damage, and plantation owners were desperate to find a solution. In the year 1872, plantation owners in Hawaii came across a method used by Caribbean sugar producers to deal with their rat problem. The idea seemed simple: bring mongooses from India to eat the rats, and the problem would be solved. So during the 1880s, Hawaiian planters imported 72 mongooses from Jamaica to the Big Island. Their offspring were later sent to plantations on other islands, like Maui, Molokai, and Oahu, all in the hope of finally solving the rat problem. However, some people on the Big Island were skeptical about the mongoose plan. They thought more research was needed to understand how the animals performed in the Caribbean before they were brought to Hawaii. Sadly, these concerns were ignored, and soon the plan's major flaw became clear. Rats are nocturnal, meaning they are active at night, while mongooses are diurnal, which means they are active during the day. Because of this difference, mongooses rarely came across the rats. Instead of solving the rat problem, the mongooses began preying on other native Hawaiian species, especially birds and turtles. The eggs of these animals became easy targets, and things started to spiral out of control. What was supposed to be a solution ended up creating even bigger problems for Hawaii's wildlife. As native species started to struggle, the government stepped in to keep mongooses out of sensitive areas. But by then, it seemed like the chance to fix the issue had passed. Today, controlling the mongoose population has become nearly impossible. Mongooses have been blamed for the extinction of at least 8 native bird species in Hawaii, many of which were on the federal endangered species list. This has led to a major issue for the island's wildlife, as these animals are now lost forever because of the introduction of mongooses. Interestingly, the Hawaiian government doesn't call the mongoose introduction biological control, as the animals weren't properly assessed for environmental impact before they were brought in. Hawaii wasn't the only place where invasive species problems were faced. Around the same time, in the year 1872, a British colonist brought mongooses to a sugar plantation in Jamaica to help deal with the rat problem. Just like in Hawaii, the mongooses didn't do what was expected. Instead of eating the rats, they spread across the island and caused a decline in local bird and reptile populations. But things only got worse from there. With fewer animals around to keep them in check, ticks started to spread uncontrollably, making the situation even worse. The colonists complained to British authorities, but they were told that nature would eventually balance itself out. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The introduction of mongooses caused serious harm to Jamaica's native species, showing once again how introducing non-native animals without proper research can have disastrous consequences for local communities. Then there's another case of mongoose trouble on 4 small islands in the Caribbean Sea. In St. Croix, mongooses were introduced, and they caused a local community of small ground lizards to scramble through fallen leaves, struggling to survive. Unfortunately, the mongooses nearly wiped out these lizards on the island that shared their name. The lizards faced 2 main threats: the mongooses and land redevelopment on 2 neighboring coastal islands. Only about 400 lizards managed to escape being eaten. Luckily, people raised the alarm in time and conservation efforts began. The lizards were moved to safer areas, and thanks to these efforts, their population has now grown to nearly 3,000. Scientists are not only working to prevent their extinction, but also planning to reintroduce them to their original home, giving them a chance to return to the island they once lived on. Mongooses aren't just seen as destructive in places like Hawaii. Recently, the Animal Welfare Society of South Africa, or AWS, warned residents in Kenwyn to be cautious because a mongoose had been spotted in the area. This grey mongoose had been regularly visiting properties, and reports on social media indicated its presence in Kenwyn and Lowan for most of 2024. The AWS advised people not to feed or approach the animal and warned against trying to domesticate it as a pet. They also encouraged residents to keep their dogs away from the mongoose. But are mongooses only known for causing destruction? Or can they have some positive qualities too? Stay tuned to find out. Are mongooses all bad? The history between humans and mongooses goes back a long time. In a recent study of tombs that were around 4,000 years old in Egypt, researchers discovered a fascinating drawing. It showed a person leading an animal that looked like a mongoose on a leash. This is the only image of its kind found in Egyptian art, and it clearly shows the mongoose wearing a collar and leash. Although mongooses have never been fully domesticated through controlled breeding, some cultures have kept them as pets. The main reason for this was to help control pests like snakes, rats, and mice, which can cause problems in homes and farms. This ancient drawing offers a glimpse into how mongooses were valued long ago. Interestingly, scientists believe the mongoose in the tomb might have been used to scare off birds, making hunting easier. There's even some debate about a second leash shown in the drawing. Some people think it could be attached to a dog, while others believe it might be tied to a hornless goat. Then, in Sri Lanka, where dogs are usually used to sniff out illegal substances, a new idea emerged using mongooses instead. Locals have relied on mongooses for generations to chase away cobras from their farms, so why not train them to detect illegal items? A grant of $50,000 was awarded for a pilot project, and a specialist was brought in. The National Zoo even offered its facilities for the training. This provided an opportunity to see if mongooses could adapt to this new task. The plan was to release a few mongooses into a cargo container filled with car parts. If they detected anything illegal, they would emerge with their tails bristling. Believe it or not, mongooses can be trained, and they passed the test with flying colors. Unfortunately, due to changes in leadership and political issues, the project was abandoned. It's a real disappointment because it would have been amazing to see mongooses working as customs officers, sniffing out contraband. While mongooses are often seen as an invasive species, it's important to remember that humans are the ones who introduced them to these new habitats in the first place. If anyone is to blame here, it's us. After all, mongooses are simply animals acting on their instincts, and those instincts might not always line up with what humans expect or want. In their native habitats, mongooses are like unsung heroes. Quietly keeping things in balance, these small, quick creatures are vital to the health of their ecosystems. One of their biggest jobs is keeping the population of rodents and other small mammals in check. By hunting these animals, mongooses help prevent overpopulation, which can lead to damaged crops and the spread of diseases. Imagine a world where rats run wild, chewing on everything in sight. Not a great thought, right? And yes, mongooses still help control venomous snake populations, even if it's not always in the way we want. But their benefits go beyond that. They also play a key role in seed dispersal, which is crucial for plant growth and forest renewal. While searching for food, mongooses often eat fruits and then spread the seeds elsewhere. This helps plants grow and thrive, contributing to the overall health of the environment. In a way, mongooses act like tiny gardeners, planting seeds wherever they go. Aside from their ecological impact, mongooses are also fascinating to watch. They have an interesting social structure, living in groups known as mobs or packs. These groups work together to protect their territory, raise their young, and hunt for food. Watching them is like seeing a well-organized team in action, with each member playing an important role. It's a great reminder of how teamwork and cooperation are vital in the animal world. So the next time you think about mongooses, remember that these small but powerful creatures are crucial to the health and balance of their ecosystems. They might not get as much attention as other animals, but what they do is incredibly important. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.